All right, thank you so much for having me. I am Claire Gilliam. Let me see if I can pull up my introduction. All right, I'll be your presenter for the next 30 minutes. I have been in Texas adult education for 3 years now. I started with Literacy Council of Tyler in East Texas, and I was a GED instructor, mostly ABE, adult basic education, so a little bit lower level basic skills, and really fell in love with that. And then in 2020, I was actually offered the position of distance learning coordinator with Literacy Council of Tyler. So I did that 2020 through 2021, and then actually last month I just joined Region 5 in Southeast Texas. Beaumont, Texas is where I am presenting from today. So I'm excited to be here and share with y'all just some things that I have learned about distance education through my experiences. But first, I'd like to get to know y'all a little bit. Sorry if this already happened earlier, but I wasn't able to join until just a few minutes ago. I just caught the tail end of the last conversation. So I'd love for this to be interactive and hear from y'all as much as possible. So in the chat, just let me know what's your role in adult education, and then I'd like to gauge everyone's experience with distance education. So maybe just a sentence or two about your experiences with distance education. Are you familiar with it? And kind of what have you done with distance education, if any? If not, just say nothing. So give a couple minutes for that. So I'm going to be watching in the chat, but also if you'd like to unmute, if that's easier, feel free to unmute as well. I love this kind of free-flowing forum type setup that y'all have. Awesome. So Pam is a volunteer ESL tutor, Literacy Council Fort Bend County. Awesome. Yes, taught long distance for a year during the pandemic. Sorry, y'all. Can y'all hear me? All right. So Pam, I don't know if y'all heard me. Pam is a ESL volunteer who taught long distance during the pandemic. A lot of us, oops, let me turn down my music. I'll just pause the music. All right. So thank you, Paula, for letting me know that. Paula is here from Train PD. You have distance education specialists, more of a novice in distance education. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Tammy, for sharing. So Tammy, they offer both in-person and virtual classes. Wonderful, helping students register and navigate the online systems.
While we're waiting, I'll just add, if you need PD credit, please enter it in the chat room for this session.
Just give it a couple more minutes for everyone to share. Thank you for those who shared. All right, thank you, Ruth. Ruth is also working with Literacy Volunteers, Program Coordinator. Wonderful. They'll offer digital literacy, ESL civics, financial, and health, hybrid learning. Awesome, on Zoom and WhatsApp. That's amazing. Thank you, Ruth. So obviously, within the past year, a lot of people have been forced to become a little more comfortable with distance education than maybe normally we would. So thank you all for sharing. I'm going to go ahead and move on, but continue writing in the chat if you're still typing. Again, I'm your presenter, Claire Gilliam. So another question for you, and feel free to unmute if that's easier for you, or you can answer in the chat. So if you've been working with distance education students or students at a distance, what are some challenges that they face? So I framed this as peer distance education students, which would mean that they are working totally on their own and are not meeting regularly with a class. So they might have a point of contact as a distance education teacher or coach, but they're not attending class regularly. So what would be some challenges that someone like that might face? And we might have some clues here in the picture. Tammy says time management. Yes, I totally agree. Big factor for adult learners. Yes, so unlike K through 12 students, our students have kids a lot of times themselves, they have families, they have a lot going on, extracurricular activities, they got to be at the thing at the school at 6 p.m., you know, they have a lot going on. And so our purely distance education students, if they're not going to a class, like Tammy said, they have to schedule in that time themselves in their already crazy schedule. So that can be difficult when they don't have that separate time set up for them. Internet connection, Ruth says, not knowing how to use a video chat platforms, easily distracted at home. Yes, I can't tell you how many times when I'm thinking of hybrid learning, but internet connection is a big one. Video and audio problems, connection issues. A lot of students living in rural areas where even if they do have internet, it's a spotty connection, or you know, it's just kind of in and out. Pam says limited experience of technology. Yes, poor connectivity. Challenge to feeling connected. That is something that we're going to talk about. So we want those distance education students who are kind of out there on their own to feel like they're connected to something, because they do feel really isolated. Thank you, Pam. A lot of interruptions at home. Yes. Wi-Fi costs. Need to find free Wi-Fi locations. Yes. Thank you, Paula. I know that we have had some students maybe driving to a McDonald's or a Walmart parking lot because there's Wi-Fi, and so they can do their schoolwork. So that's not ideal. I'll share at the end, there's a website, it's called everyoneon.org, and they do offer, there's certain stipulations, they're low income or certain things like that. If they have children in the public school systems or children in school, they can get reduced cost internet and laptops. So I'll share that link at the end. I'll share it now before I forget, because I will probably forget. That's called everyoneon.org. That's just something I like to share with all my students, and then especially during the pandemic. It was very helpful. A lot of students were able to sign up for the low cost internet, and it's maybe like $5 to $10 a month, which is manageable for our students. And then they also have some laptops on there, but I think there also may be some funds through the state where you can maybe get some technology, get some of those Wi-Fi boxes for your students. So make sure to check out what you can do to help your students connect, because being able to access the technology and connect to the internet, we saw this past year, is huge. And we're seeing, there's these gaps between people who have access and people who don't. And we want everyone to be able to continue their education. All right, thank you for sharing. So some things that I have done, I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off while I'm speaking a little bit more. Okay, oops. So some things that I have done to just kind of keep myself on track when I was working with those purely distance education students. They're not coming to a class regularly. They're just working on that approved distance learning curriculum on their own. So I would use a Google Sheet. This is just a snippet of it so that I could track what hours they had completed. We were using Aztec over there, and or if for some reason they're not able to complete their school for that week, I can just make a note. And then if you have multiple distance education teachers, you can share this document with them. It's a shared Google Sheet. And that is a way for you to be able to track your students. And then we were contacting them via Remind. So this is a way to say, hey, I have contacted them, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about contacting. Let's see, I have a question in the chat. I have a slide for questions here in just a second, so I'll make sure to get to your question then. So let's see, speaking about timekeeping, so an important aspect of distance education is making sure that the students are getting those hours. That's how we, track our funding and everything. So if you do have a program that helps them track their time, then make sure that they know how to do that correctly so that they are able to log those hours. So there is quite a bit of onboarding and orientation that can go into it. And now that we're also in the Zoom world, this is something that you could do on Zoom, face-to-face, or on Zoom. So speaking about communication, something that I found that worked well for our program was weekly and monthly check-ins. So the weekly check-ins, at least 2 to 3 times we would be texting them. And I say we because I, myself and another teacher, we were working together with the distance learning students. So on that Remind app that you can use to text students without sharing your phone number, it's great. We would check in at the beginning of the week. We would tell them how they did on their hours for the previous week. And then at the end of the week, on the second contact, we would let them know how they're doing that week for their hours. And, do they need to maybe put in some more work on the weekend that's coming up so that they can complete their goal. Monthly, I like to do a face-to-face meeting. We used to do just face-to-face meetings monthly, but then of course the pandemic happened. So a lot of times this happens on Zoom, and the pandemic has been awful, but some things came about that maybe we thought, oh, this is a better way of doing this, because we found that the distance education students, it was a lot easier for them to meet on Zoom than to come up to campus for 15, 20, 30 minutes. It might be really difficult with their schedule, like we were talking about with those crazy schedules. So being able to meet with your video on in person, not in person, with your video on Zoom, having that little bit of face-to-face, even if it's through the screen contact, is helpful for students to feel connected. Like someone mentioned, anytime you can get your video on so that they can see you, they can hear your voice, that is gonna let them know that they're not alone out there and they're not doing this all by themselves. And you'll see I like to send out another of my weekly texts. Would not be about hours, it would just be solely about motivation, and you can do this and I'm here for you. And that really went a long ways. I usually sent this out like on Sunday or Monday to let them know, hey, you're doing awesome and you can do this. Because sometimes they may not have anyone telling them that they can do this, and they may actually have people telling them that they can't do it. So you might be that only voice telling them, hey, this is something that you can do. This is something really fun. This project or this presentation was actually a labor of love between me and my colleague, Ashley Winkle, and this was her idea. She created this wall, and let me see if I can put the link in the chat so you can actually go to it. But basically, if you're familiar with Padlet, Padlet is a kind of like a digital bulletin board, so people can go and post on it. So since these students were at a distance, they're all separated. And so she created a GED graduate inspiration wall so that when someone graduates, they can post their picture, and it's kind of a celebration, and it motivates the other students and shows them, hey, a lot of other people are graduating, I can do it too. And it's kind of their time to shine since they are so separated. It's creating that connection. All right, I'm gonna pause for a moment. I'm gonna put this link in the chat if you want to go to the actual deal. And then we'll pause for a moment for questions. Look back, I think there was a question from Jackie. What are your suggestions about working with students who just don't feel comfortable studying with technology? How do we get by them? Oh, that's such a good question, Jackie. I would say really make it seem doable. And what I mean by that, really just focus on one skill at a time. I was working with a group in person when I first started teaching, and basically the whole group, it was the adult basic skills class, and none of them wanted to get on the computers, and I wanted them to get on the computers because that's a workforce skill. So a lot of them that told me, you know, I can't do the computers, I just can't do it, I would have them just log into their Gmail every day, and that was all we did, just log into your Gmail, and then that was it. So for like 6 months they logged into their Gmails, and I just remember watching one guy who had told me that computers just don't work around him. One day he just logged in and grabbed his computer and logged into his Gmail without even asking me, where previously I would have to walk him through it every day, and he finally got it. So just be positive and encouraging. Focus on one thing at a time, one skill at a time. Once they have that down, move on to the next skill. Unfortunately, you know, a lot of people are opposed to technology, but I would just frame it as it's a workforce skill. A lot of things that we have to do now are on the computer. Even just going to the doctor's office, you might have to use a computer to check in. So just framing it as this is really going to help you in the future, just be successful in your life if you can buy into this. It's difficult though. I hope that helped, Jackie. Any other questions? Let's see. Are there significant differences between paid tech learning platform versus free options, i.e. Burlington English versus USA Learns? I am not sure. I know that there are certain curriculums that are approved digital learning curriculums. that you can use to track your proxy hours or track your distance learning hours. If you just put them on Khan Academy or something like that, then they're not getting those hours even though they're studying. But Burlington English and USA Learns, I'm not familiar with those specific softwares particularly. Did that help at all, Jackie?
Yes, thank you very much. I know that's a big challenge, and I know it's a challenge for most people who are trying to, even the ones who embrace technology, trying to do this transition. So I appreciate your presentation and also your insights. The next question for, if you have some advice or suggestions, is getting the buy-in from the instructors. Sometimes, and I've been in conversations, across the nation, they're talking about this on university and even college level, that just like, many people, they're like, just let me go back to my classroom. So, the teachers that are also facing the same type of challenges as students, have you had to deal with that? And if so, do you have suggestions on getting staff buy-in?
Yes, definitely kind of the same thing as with the students, the way you frame it, just remaining positive and also framing it as, this is really going to benefit the students, because I know at our program we saw during COVID, we had, our enrollment was lower, but we had a lot of people who were able to continue classes where they would not have because of technology. And we've actually had people who do not want to come back, students who do not want to come back to face-to-face because it's so much more convenient for them to get on the computer. So I would just frame it as, this is something that we need to be doing for our students to be able to help them the best way that we can and be able to reach those students who are not able to drive to class. Maybe they don't have gas or they don't have a car, they don't have a babysitter, so it's much more convenient for them to get on the computer at home. So really just enforcing that it might be uncomfortable, but it's really helping the students be able to continue their education. And again, one thing at a time. If you are wanting teachers to do all this technology stuff, they're just going to get overwhelmed. So if you just kind of start with one thing at a time and just be patient and give them grace.
What do you think about offering, and I know, in this age, again, budget challenges and whatnot, and again, just, not going to hold you to the fire to it, so to speak, but how about incentives? What are your thoughts about providing incentives for students, for teachers, for staff who embrace the new age of instruction, and perhaps maybe still offering the pre-pandemic option, but maybe offering some extras for those who are willing to go into the new frontier?
I had never thought about that, but that's a really good idea. Yeah, I'm not sure about that, but definitely if the funding is there, I think that would be great. I know that at the program that I was with, they were really great about, telling the teachers, who wants to continue teaching online. I think I was the only one who wanted to continue teaching online, but I, as a teacher, thought it was very convenient to stay home and teach. But some teachers were not comfortable with that. So the ones who wanted to go face-to-face, those were the ones who were given the first option to return to the class. And then the ones who wanted to teach online. So you will hopefully have a mix of the two, who want to teach from the comfort of their home, and then some who are not comfortable with that. So just being flexible and working with people and meeting them where they're at. All right, great questions, y'all. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on because we are running up on some time here. So we had kind of mostly been speaking about pure distance education students, but now I do want to talk about the hybrid and blended learning. A lot of us, I guess probably most of us, have had to transition to teaching online. I had never taught online before the pandemic, and I thought, what the heck am I going to do? And then after doing it for a year, honestly, I prefer it and love teaching online at home and not having to drive, and I'll just be in my PJs. So some things that just suggestions for if you're teaching on Zoom or teaching in an online environment, put your face out there, take a picture of yourself. I would rotate. This is just a slide I would show my students. This was from my vacation this summer, but I would rotate, pictures from my life just so they can feel connected and know that you're a real person out there and you care about them, and you're here for them, and just that face-to-face interaction. Some things to kind of encourage them, talking about incentives. This was not a financial incentive, but it's just kind of a celebration of people who were putting in the work. They get their name. These are fake names, but I would create this slide once a week. If my Zoom students who met with me on Zoom, if they did some extra work outside of class on one of these programs, they would get on the weekly leaderboard. And when I first started this, it was pretty cutthroat. People were doing like crazy amounts of hours to try to get on the leaderboard. It died down a little bit, but even just that little bit of recognition, even if it's not financial, is exciting, and it encourages people to continue. And the ones who are not doing it, they think, oh, well, maybe I need to put those hours in so I can get on that leaderboard. This was a slide that I would show during my Zoom class. I created all these slides just on Google Slide. And so what we would do during the middle of class, we would have 2 hours on Zoom. So that's quite a bit of time. So in the middle of it, we would have a break. I would remind them, stand up, stretch. A lot of people just want to sit there, but you need to get that body moving so that the blood pumps to your brain. And we also created a class playlist. I used my Spotify account, and I asked students what was their walkout song. And so if they're a professional athlete, what song would they want to play on the loudspeakers when they walk out on the field? So they could send me a request. It needed to be appropriate for school. So I would have to screen the requests. And then if it was appropriate, I could put them on the Spotify playlist. And then we played the playlist on the break and had like a little dance break. So that was fun. They got really into it. And I guess that's all I have for the Zoom students. I really liked y'all's questions and hearing from y'all. So just have a few minutes to wrap up. I'd love to hear if you have any other thoughts, anything that you're doing with distance education or hybrid students that you would like to share, any best practices, or if you have any ideas. Jackie had that great idea about incentives for teaching online. So just a time to share for questions or any more discussion. I'm going to look back in the chat.
Are there any particular sites that you can recommend? I know you mentioned a few, but for an organization that's just getting started that really doesn't have a technology bucket or is not federally funded, do you have suggested sites to get started?
Yes, let me think. GCF, I think it's GCF Learns. I'm gonna have to look that up. Let me see here. Oh, and I was going to share, this is Padlet. There you go. I knew there was a free in there somewhere, but Padlet, this is to create the online bulletin board if you're interested in that. So let's take a look at GCF Learn Free. Kind of a wacky link, but I'll put that in there. So this is a free site put together by Goodwill, and they have a lot of technology how-tos. Oh, it's so great. And so they have all sorts of things: Office, email, the internet, basic computers. And so let's just look at this. They'll have a little tutorial. And so you can use this with your staff or with your students. You can train your staff on it and then they can share it with the students. They have this YouTube playlist. So this is a really great free resource. This is the first one I can think of. I'll try to think if I can think of any more. North Star Digital Literacy, it is a paid curriculum, but it is on the cheaper side. It's, I believe, $500 for a year. But they do have some free options that they made available during the pandemic. Whoops. So these are assessments that students can take to kind of test their skills. If you do purchase it, you can have access to more, but some of it, let's see.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm a big fan of North Star Digital Literacy. When I was president at Eastside University, that was one of the initiatives that I began over there. In fact, Eastside is one of only 5 now licensed digital literacy testing centers under North Star Digital Literacy. One of the big things that I feel is missing, especially with the evolving technology-based models, is an actual research-based assessment for digital literacy. And you guys, that is an essential component of developing your digital literacy classroom. You need that measure in order to have skills gains and support for those. So those assessments on North Star are free for some of the basics. And as Carrie just mentioned, if you go ahead and do the license, and I know we're talking about nickels and dimes from the previous presentation, but it's $500 a year, and it opens up your access to more in-depth assessments, as well as printing off the certifications that you can provide to your students to certify that their skills are at performance levels that are reflected in those tests. So it's a really fantastic resource.
Thank you,
So,
Jackie.
Claire-
That was a great. Yes. Hello.
Yes, Claire, we went a few minutes over. I want to thank you very much for this digital literacy exercise. I have another page of notes here. Things to pay
Awesome.
attention
Thank you
to.
so
Nice job,
much.
Claire.
Thank you.
Yes.
It was wonderful joining y'all. I wish I could stay longer, but I've got to get back to work.